I just watched Sinners, and I recently returned to the theaters this week to watch another scary movie, Until Dawn. But how does it compare? And as someone who has also played Until Dawn, I have some thoughts on this one. So before we get into the movie, just a quick spoiler warning. I will be getting into all of it. I am going to do a breakdown as well. So just if you haven't seen this one yet, just a heads up, plot and stuff we're getting into. Although the good news is, I don't actually think that this will really spoil the movie for you, this review, because the plot doesn't really matter so much for this one, in my opinion. So I think you could watch the review and still enjoy the movie, but just a heads up for those that don't want things spoiled. So we are following some characters that you might not know from the Until Dawn game because they're not in it, but there is Clover, who's basically looking for her sister Mel. She's basically on this trip with her friends who have essentially brought her on this trip because they want her to find closure. Her sister has gone missing and they kind of want her to be able to like move on and like get over that grief. And her friends are Megan and Nina and Abe and her ex Max. Now, don't worry if you can't remember these names, because I remember these names now, but if you ask me in a week, I probably won't. And it really doesn't matter, because these characters, they don't really matter. They're just sacks of meat to be punished. What ends up happening is these friends sort of end up at this welcome center, which it turns out is the last place that Mel was maybe seen. Well, definitely they think it's the last place Mel was seen because her name is in a guest book. And things start to get really weird. They start off with the fact that when they arrive at this place, there is a storm that is literally happening a step off the property. And when you step on the property, it's like completely clear. So that's a weird phenomenon that is going on. And then it starts to get dark. The sun starts to get real low and stuff starts getting really weird, as in they all die. That kind of weird. But don't worry, because after they die, they come right back to life again, and they find out that they basically just have to survive the night to get through this, because they're going to keep dying on repeat until they can survive. However, it turns out that they also learn they only have 13 days in order to do this, just like in the game. Oh wait, they also discovered that they're in a town that basically was a mining town and it sunk underground, and maybe why this is happening has to do with this town, or maybe not. There's a lot of freaky stuff happening in the town, and each night more of the town comes back to life. Are we gonna fully explore that? No. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that we're not going to really fully explore. But that's basically what's going on. So they have to try to survive, and each night there's different horrors that are coming after them. Different nightmares, different threats, different fears. Now, I have a lot of criticisms about this movie, especially in regards to it being an adaptation of the game. In a way, it's an adaptation of the game. More on that later. But before we get to that, I actually want to talk about some stuff that I legitimately liked about this movie, because I do think there is actually quite a bit here to like. So let's talk about that first, and then we'll get into the other stuff. So first of all, I just want to shout out the gore and the practical effects. There were a lot of practical effects in this movie. I mean, this movie has a $15 million budget, and I think I could guess where a lot of that budget went. And it was into the gore, the blood, buckets of it, I got to imagine. And it shows. And it's clear that the film also knows that this is probably its strongest point. You know that because at one point there is literally a clip show in here. We just kind of get past the fact that it's been 13 days. Like, I'm pretty sure it had only been 4 nights. And then they're talking about how long has it been? And they're like, 4 days? No, 5 days. No, 13 days. And I was in my seat being like, wait, what? It's been 13 days? And then they go through Abe's phone. And earlier in the film, it's actually established that Abe has been recording stuff on his phone. And then they bring that back around, which he's been recording stuff the whole time. So, I mean, good on them. Basic storytelling point. They introduced something, they brought it back. And when they're going through his phone, they see all these other nights that we haven't seen yet that they just show us through a clip show of these videos on his phone. They're basically just additional scary moments so they could have those in the movie, which, while I do think some of those and the found footage elements of that were kind of fun, it is still a clip show in a movie. And you know, you usually get clip shows in TV shows, and that's only because they're usually put in there because they need more time to like write or film something, and so they do a clip show. This is a movie, so the whole time that you're making it, the whole point is to fill the time with the movie. and they did a clip show, so that was a choice. But that's kind of getting into some of the criticism. So before we fully dive in there, let's talk about some other things that I liked. I did also like the set decoration in this movie, the set deck as we would call it, and I also really like the props. I think the hourglass clock that they have in this was really well done, and I also feel like the decoration in general of the sets, there's a lot of fun details that they added in there. I feel like the people that were decorating these sets had a great time. The sets themselves actually feel pretty basic, but the decoration is what makes them fun. So good on you, props and set deck. I also actually kind of liked the lighting, and now I know, some people are probably not going to like this lighting because it is tungsten for a lot of it, and it's very yellow, but I actually kind of liked that because it felt like a bit of a haunted house. It's like a bit of an eerie warmth, and then when they go outside, some, not all, but some of the moonlit lighting actually looked quite nice, I thought. You know, not all the lighting is great in this, but there are just a couple moments where I was like, oh, I kind of like that lighting. And you know, I know it's not going to be everybody's favorite, and that's totally fine. If that's you and you don't like tungsten, totally fine. I think ultimately what I really enjoyed about this movie is that there is a lot of creativity to be found within it. And I think especially in regards to the gory moments, especially in regards to some of the detailed choices they made in those moments, I mean, it's really fun. You can tell that they just had a lot of fun making this movie and putting together some of these moments, that the actors even had a lot of fun creating it as well. And I think those are some of the strongest story moments is actually in the horror elements, in the gore elements that we see here. I mean, they made a choice to just spontaneously combust people at one point. That's one of the fears we come up against. And they just did that. They just went for it. They took meat sacks and they blew them up. Crazy. I mean, at this point in time, you know, you just don't get to see as much practical effects, I feel like, as this film was throwing at us. But before we get into the criticisms, I would just like to also point out something that I think will help to make sense of some of the criticisms I'm going to have. And that is the director on this film. The director is David F. Sandberg. And David F. Sandberg is an interesting director. If you're not familiar with him, he kind of came into prominence for his short, Lights Out, which is a horror short, which is actually pretty good, pretty well received. There's also a feature film of it, Lights Out, didn't do as well. But he's also directed movies like Shazam, which made a lot of money. But then he's also directed movies like the sequel, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, which made not a lot of money. And basically, I would say Until Dawn is kind of like Fury of the Gods, or how it was for me when I watched that movie. The setup is actually better than the follow-through. The first part of this movie, I kind of liked better than where it ended up taking us in the end. It's basically like Live, Die, Repeat, or Groundhog Day, which, let's be honest, this concept has been done a lot. It's even been done in horror movies as well before, but I feel like it's a cool concept. There's a reason why we do it a lot, and it's because it's interesting. And I thought it was a cool way to also show us, you know, Until Dawn, there's a lot of different sort of pathways you can go down. So I feel like it allows them to just explore the idea of a lot of alternate things that can happen to you. Now, granted, a lot of these are not actually from the video game that we explore, but that's fine. It's just the idea of giving you that feeling. So it kind of works. But the thing that is a problem with this movie is that it feels like it doesn't know if it wants to be something like Happy Death Day or if it wants to be something like Cabin in the Woods. And then there are the elements of Until Dawn, which are also kind of just mixed in there, kind of on like the edges of the film. Like we have things like The Fears, which is, you know, that's Until Dawn, sure. There's Peter Stormare's in it. I mean, hey, Peter Stormare's here, that's cool. They also had Rami Malek in there. I mean, he's not in the movie, but there is a picture of him and a reference to his character from the game. So hey, Rami Malek. But ultimately, this film just feels like it's kind of too many things jumbled together as a result, and then nothing really makes sense in the end. Like at the end of the movie, we find out that Dr. Allen was kind of behind everything, who is Peter Stormare's character, also from the games, but then it's also like implied that the town is important for like the fears to come to life, and he's been studying fears and the creation of Wendigos through fears, and that's a whole thing. And then you're like, okay, that's interesting, but where does that lead us, and how does that make any sense? And then he combusts, and you're like, so is he susceptible to the fears? What's happening in this movie? What's happening in this movie? And ultimately, I think the answer is not much is happening in this movie. There's just really no depth here. There are places this film could have gone, but it doesn't really ever take us there. It hints at ideas, but we never really go. It hints at themes even. It hints at this idea of like the meaning of life and death, and how like life is more valuable because death is like a one-time thing. And so when you mess with that, it's like messing with the balance of kind of life in the universe. It explores these ideas, but it just doesn't really go into them. And anytime something is brought up, it feels like it's kind of undermined by the script because we either just move on or it's like downplayed. So nothing ever really gets to sink in. It's just too many things that all end up kind of being at the surface level. This is really disappointing when you consider how great of a game Until Dawn is. It has a really rich story. It has a really rich world full of characters that you actually care about, whether you love them and you want them to live, or you hate them and you really want them to die. Compared to these characters that we have in the game, I mean, you just don't really get connected to the ones that are in the movie. They're not necessarily bad characters, but they just don't have much going on. We never really get to explore them enough. So in the end, major spoilers, when they all survive, you just don't really care. And then they just kind of drive off, and it feels like a really lackluster ending. Now, Gary Doberman actually worked on this script, and also Blair Butler was brought in, who was probably brought in because of her experience with screenwriting, which makes sense. She's also a comic, so I mean, lots of writing experience there between them. But Doberman actually said that he wanted this film to be different than the games. And so it's actually not really an adaptation of the game so much as it is a sequel to the game. It's kind of how they wrote it. And I think that that makes sense. He said he didn't want it to be the same because the remaster was going to be coming out around the same time, which it did. It came out last year in like October, so it's only been a few months. So it makes sense that he would want this story to be different. And I think it also makes sense when you consider, you know, the game itself is multiple hours of playtime. I think it's like 10-hour-ish playtime that you're going to have with that game. So it doesn't really make sense to have the same story that you have there because it's just a much longer, much more in-depth story. You're also playing the characters, so it's like a totally different experience. So I get wanting to do something different and you gotta condense it. So why not do just like a different story? Sure, that's a great idea. They even tease at the end that this could kind of be a franchise with kind of introducing like a new home. And I don't know if the home is kind of supposed to be a little nod as well to Until Dawn because it's kind of like a winter chalet, which is also the vibes kind of. And until, well, you're at a chalet. I don't think it's winter at the time, but you know what I mean. I feel like they basically want to build a franchise with this, and the whole idea is at the end, you know, now we're going to do it at another place, and it starts again. Whoa. And you know what? The reality is for $15 million, I think this movie might make its money back and might actually do really well with what it has, at least. And so there is a chance that this could become a franchise. Although I will say, after watching this version, I don't know if I would trust them to make this a franchise because I just feel like there's not going to be much there beyond some good gore for me to be interested in because the writing just didn't really catch me. Ultimately, I think the issue with this is that there's just too many cooks here. We have Doberman, you know, we have another writer coming in. We've got David F. Sandberg here, who probably has his ideas about what he wants to do with this. We've got the studio, and I mean, this is a Sony movie. Now, not to say that all Sony movies are bad, because that is not true at all, but it does feel like a Sony product, you know? It feels like a movie that was made to be a product. And the other thing that I think is crazy is when you think about Until Dawn is a game that was made to be an interactive horror story. They wanted to take the idea of a scary movie and turn it into an interactive game where you get to play as the characters and you get to explore the world. Like, what if you were in a horror movie? That's the idea of it. And I think that that's so cool. But then when you take a game that was made to be a 10-hour interactive version of a horror movie and you just turn it into a horror movie, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of why you made the game, you know? And it's not surprising that they struggled to figure out what to really do with this. And so I think it was just too many people involved who had ideas about what this should be. And so because of that, there wasn't like enough of a strong leader, like sort of guiding the ship so that it could be unified under one major brain that's kind of like guiding everything. Like, it's Sinners has Ryan Coogler, and this feels like it just had a bunch of influences, but no one that was really strong enough to say, this is my idea, this is my vision, and here's what we're saying. The film doesn't say anything. It's just, it's kind of fun to watch, but that's about it. So overall, I give this one a 3 out of 5. I mean, I'm giving it a 3 out of 5 even, just because I think the gore elements were so well done. Some of the decoration in this is so well done. And the acting is actually very good. I don't think the actors are the problem here. It's really the script that I take issue with. And even then, I mean, what happened? I don't know. I think, like I said, they're just pulled in too many directions, which just makes this film okay. It's not bad. It's not great. It's just okay, leaning a little towards good. Now, that being said, I feel like if you wanted to go see this movie, if you have a cheap theater day, you know, like here we have Tuesdays, which are like half off. If you have a day like that, this is a good film to see on that day, because there's enough there that I feel like it's worth the price of admission. It's a fun watch. And especially, I think if you have a theater with people in it that are here for the gore, I think you'll all have a good time together. However, that's basically all there really is to this movie. So, yeah. Kind of disappointing as someone who's a fan of Until Dawn, but there you have it. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And, you know, how do you feel about video game movies? What do you think makes them work? What do you think makes them not work? And would you want to see something like Until Dawn as a franchise? Do you feel like it cheapens the game? Have you played the game? And what were your thoughts on that? Let me know down in the comments. I'll see you next time. And until then, friends, as always, stay nerdy. Bye! And if you missed my review on another Sony film that just hurt me, you can check out Madam Web here. Click it, please. I suffered for you. I suffered for you. I really wanted this film to be good.